during this very challenging time where we had to be forced to be separate from our friends and our colleagues, I was really grateful for this Anchor app, which has allowed me to continue the podcast after almost 1 year of working on it. It's free. You simply go to anchor.fm and download the app. And there you'll find all the tools that you need to record and edit your podcast, as well as to invite people onto your podcast through the app. Anchor also distributes the podcast for you on Apple, Spotify, and many other platforms. You have absolutely nothing to do except to record your podcast. If you have an ad like this, you can also make money. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. I would recommend it for anyone who wants to get their voice out there, has something to contribute. Go for it. Anchor.fm is where you go to download the free app and to get started. Good luck with your podcast. Welcome to a new episode of the Bees and Honey podcast. Today we'll be speaking with American artist Michael Rees, who has been at the forefront of art created with technology. Often his work involves the use of technology, but also ideas related to technology. And you can see his sculptures publicly and privately all across the world. He just had an exhibition which closed, I believe, on the 14th at West Gallery. And Michael will speak a little bit about his work and about its place in our American art history and global art history, as well as some current events. And hopefully he will give us a hint of how his work interacts not only with what he does at home. His wife is also an artist, Marianne Strandell, but also how he gives back to the community by interacting with all the young upcoming artists who he teaches. Hope you enjoy this. I realized the format of the podcast doesn't necessarily appeal to everyone when it's a bit more probing or a bit more personal. I understand some people like to talk about the professional aspect, but you know, when we talk about art, it's something personal. It's your art is for you only. Only Michael Rees could make what Michael Rees is making. So tell us what Michael
Get the truth, baby.
Exactly. So tell me what you're up to. What have you been up to? What have you been creating? What have you been showing? Tell us everything, like your therapist.
Well, okay, good. I like the approach. I think it's a good approach. I think I'm a big proponent. I love this guy from the 19th century named von Kleist, and he wrote a tiny little. He was a playwright. He wrote a tiny little book, and he said, if ever you want to understand something, grab a friend or a kind of an acquaintance or something, and tell them what it bothers you, what's complicated. And you'll end up inventing all this beautiful language to explain your position. And so I love the process of speculating and creating through speech. By the way, he called it the midwifery of thoughts. So I love this process. I think it's amazing. So I think you're and also to make it personal, to root it in the personal is a positive thing too.
Yeah.
So So the what have I been making? This spring has been weird, right? I mean, I think, and we're still in it. There's so much going on, and it's so complicated, right? But people are not playing by the rules, and by people, you know what I mean. Our boss, Il Duce, is playing by the rules. He's constantly undermining our norms, and et cetera, et cetera. So I don't want to make this about him.
Yeah.
But so it's been very, very complicated. So I spent the first part of when we first got locked down. I run a lab at the university. We have 3D printing and robot carving and laser cutting and all that kind of thing. And I spent March through May the end of March through May, working to help build PPE, personal protective equipment, for
Wow.
hospitals and nurses and whatever in the region, right? And I felt like that was really an important thing to do. I just think it's incredible the bravery and just the will, that we signed up for this and we're gonna see it through. That the nurses and the doctors and the various physicians assistants, the whole nine yards that they exhibited, and to do so in the face of getting sick and not having the protective equipment that they need. So I didn't do I wasn't a major force in all this stuff. There were some people that were really large scale and did some amazing stuff, organized large. But I really felt like it needed to be in the community.
Yeah.
We needed to worry about our community. And so I was part of a team that was at Montclair.
Mm-hmm.
We identified designs.
Mm-hmm.
It was funny. We all had 3D printers and things like that. But we identified designs that could be made in a matter of, under a minute. It depends on how you calculate it, but under a minute, as opposed to rapid prototyping, something that would take 8 hours or 9 hours to make.
Right.
So that was one of the things that we really accomplished. And then my lab, I was a little hamstrung by by various issues. And so we were able to make those back straps which relieve the stress of the straps going around people's ears. When you wear a mask all day long and the elastic is moving
Yeah.
ear. So we made thousands of those, and we helped to make the face shields and to identify a design that could be implemented in super short time. I think our team in all made about 35 or 40,000 face shields, and we're able to deliver them to local hospitals. And I was really happy to participate. The university wanted to do a big PR campaign on like how we responded, and I just really didn't want to do it. My feeling was that this was for the people that were really the heroes, the people that really risked their lives to help us. That's who we should do articles about.
Well,
So
tell me, what university was it again?
it's a William Patterson University. That's
Oh,
where I teach.
okay. Yeah. Well, that's good to have us record that. We know now where it is.
Yeah, yeah. So I was happy to participate, and also one of my former grad students, a woman named Farida Demirkan, who I really admire. She's from Turkey, and she returned to Turkey. She also was very instrumental in all of this stuff. She and I were like a team, and we really responded. And she's an artist. She's traveled the world. She's been to almost 120 countries. She's an amazing human being.
Mm-hmm.
She was a big part of helping with this, creating the personal protective equipment, along with my colleagues at Montclair State University, Ian Kerr, and his team. We did the best we could. We
Well,
helped.
I think that's amazing that you've literally taken artists creating change into your hands and made a physical manifestation of that. Like you literally
Yeah,
you contributed to change. Yeah. I mean, I think we're all called to do something right now, and that is a beautiful example.
yeah. Thanks.
So tell me again because I prefaced this discussion with describing how you have used technology in your own work. So
Right.
what about this exhibition that just ended recently, July 14th at the West Gallery? How was that?
Actually, it's funny. It's still going on.
Okay.
I mean, it's kind of tragic in a way. Not the exhibition, but the art space has had to close its doors, and they've had to fire all their. Not, I don't know if fire is the right word. Let go of
Yes.
all their staff,
Mm-hmm.
which is just when you think about a place. This was at Grounds for Sculpture, the West Gallery, and you think about a place like that, which is very specific to sculpture and sculpture installation, sculpture preservation and conservation, and you think about and it's a really important part of history in New Jersey, and then a little bit wider in the Philadelphia, New York region, And you think that one day, I mean, they were well funded and they did a lot of, they were involved in a lot of amazing exhibits and have been doing this for, since the 60s, maybe a little bit earlier, but certainly since the 60s. And to see them one day have to roll up and ask, let everybody go and still not be open is really, it's a, it's kind of a crisis. It's kind of traumatic and really super sad. Now, having said all that, I think a lot of arts organizations around the country are going through the same thing,
Yeah.
and this is going to be a huge hit to us, to the arts community and stuff. And it's going to contribute to how we form the future. I think it gives us some great opportunities, even though it's tragic and traumatic, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we have to look at both sides, right? We can't just take a hit and say, "Oh my God, it's the worst." So, but anyway, the thing is that the exhibition had been extended until 2021. So
Good.
it's there until January of 2021, and I
Mm-hmm.
hope in the fall, if it's safe. I
Mm-hmm.
really care. The important thing is that it's safe, right? That's I don't. My exhibition to open up to promote, my ideas and my practice. The
Well,
important
I mean, it is safe if we keep the numbers down and everyone wears a mask and stays, some distance
social.
from each other. Yeah.
So, so yeah, I mean, the exhibition was a flagship exhibition for me. It was a really, really important thing for me to do, and the it took about 3 or 3.5 years to develop. I worked with a company in China, and I had to find that company. And then also, I traveled to China several times to help realize the project. It had augmented reality, so that there's there's the sculptures which are inflated and made out of this clear and along with images that are on the side of the sculptures. You can see this at my website, michaelrees.org.
Mm-hmm.
You can see a lot of the projects that I did with inflatables, and I hope people will go and visit. There's a lot of interviews there, etc. But I think what's important to me, I think there's several important things, right? First of all, there's the content of the work, and I really wanted to create an exhibition that was about joy, and I wanted to create, I Milton Glaser passed away recently. But I remember Milton Glaser saying once, if I like Mozart and you like Mozart, maybe we can get along, you know? And despite our political views, despite this, despite that, or something else. And so I thought, I had made another show called Clowntown that showed up at the Bravin Lee Gallery in New York,
Mm-hmm.
Bravin Lee Projects in New York. And Clowntown was a kind of incredibly critical show. And it happened it was kind of a zany, manic, uh, you know, political and critical show. And the idea, I mean, I really thought it would just be a blip in history that, Hillary would become president and all this nonsense about a person who knows nothing, who's not trained. I don't mean Trump, but of course it was Trump, but I mean anybody
Yeah.
who was unprepared for their positions, unprepared for their job, has as much say in our culture because of Twitter and social media and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Person who's spent their entire life preparing policy and principles for how to govern, right? Those two things being so the show kind of engaged this notion of Clowntown, that we really, really were in the crazy house,
Right.
the house of mirrors, and nothing was what it appeared to be. And so the show really commented on that.
Yes.
And I called it a long form show in that you're supposed to have your elevator pitch, right? Your 15-minute thing. You ask me what I'm doing, I tell you in 15 words,
Mm-hmm.
120 characters. I tell you, this is what I'm doing. So I totally indulged myself. It was the opposite of an elevator speech. It was as difficult and tenuous and investigative and followed all the little tendrils. And I made what I considered to be kind of like a novel of development. That's actually a thing in literature,
Yeah.
like a little bit like Voltaire's Candide, where the character sort of stays the same throughout. Sorry, a Bildungsroman, not a novel of development, a Bildungsroman, a novel of pictures. The
Mm-hmm.
character stays the same throughout the whole experience. No matter what happens to him, he doesn't really change. But he's always drawing moral comparisons or making statements, moral statements. And so my character was the clown. And each of the sculptures sort of represented these places that the clown existed. Like, where does the clown live? What does the clown wear? What's the clown thinking? Those kinds of things. And it was also the first exhibition where I used augmented reality extensively, and I'm a real big fan of augmented reality. I think it's extraordinary. And I realized that I'd kind of created a platform. I don't mean that I've invented software. I don't mean, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But I used all these technologies to create a platform for the dissemination of a really rich sculptural experience, and that could have all kinds and levels of narrative. Of course, this is what art is. I accept that and believe that. But to be able to have interactive experiences along with videos, along with images, along with 3D objects, along with objects realized by computers, along with objects that are made by hand, I mean, the gamut of the production is kind of incredible in these works, right? It's
Yeah.
far-reaching and masterful. So that was the political critical show, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when I came to do this show at Grounds for Sculpture, I thought to myself, I don't know how effective that was. Everybody that saw that show, might have smirked or laughed or found entertainment in it, but I don't know that I changed anybody's mind or that I left a lure for somebody who was, exploring ideas or exploring these moments to have a better understanding. And so that's where I got to the idea, a little bit Milton Glazer's idea that, if I could create an experience of joy, and if people, regardless of their, thoughts and politics and philosophies and so on, could come to this and feel something elevated, something, kind of joyous and celebratory, then I feel like maybe maybe that could be a model, that maybe that could be a way that we could begin to heal some of the rifts that
Experiencing.
we're experiencing. Obviously, it got worse. It didn't get better. From the time I put the show up till now,
Right.
it got a little bit worse. Not a little bit, a lot worse. It got a lot worse. But so the show still had a little bit of that clown vibe to it. There were animals. So what happened was you would go around and you'd see these sculptures that are very mathematical and kind of organic looking. They're really beautiful, large scale things, tailored carefully, multicolored, beautiful kind of summery colors. Yellows and reds and blues and purples and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And the gallery has all this light pouring into it. So the play of light is kind of incredible. And then on the side of these gorgeous things, I put these images. And the images do two things. One is they act like targets for the technical part.
Mm-hmm.
With augmented reality, you use a tablet that you focus on an image and then other experiences. It acts like a link and it brings other experiences up. But so part of the thing is that the images work like targets for those computer experiences, the interactive experiences. But the other part of it is that they were images that contributed to the formal quality of the works. And in many cases, they sort of, a friend of mine put it really well, the artist Will Pappenheimer, they sort of destabilized the sculptures. So the sculptures had this kind of modernist glory, this mathematical kind of thing going on with them. And then the photographs kind of knocked it a little bit, took it away. Like, what's that photograph doing on that sculpture? It was kind of jarring,
Right.
and then the third experience that you had is you carried around this little stand with the tablet on it, which is how you experienced the interactive augment. And you pointed it at the images, and then other things would come up. In this case, in this exhibition, they were animals or insects. So a little bit I was playing with, well, they were animals or insects. And so the whole concept of the show was that it was a pastoral, right? Like a pastoral symphony, right? Like Beethoven would write a symphony about, what's going on in spring. And it was a pastoral, but it was a visual one. And the idea, instead of being all nature and plants and whatever, was that math was the universal language of nature. And that, so the pieces all began with these math objects, which were then maybe interrupted or certainly interfered, like interference pattern, with these images, which were interfered once again with these sort of completely fake, but very funny and believable and fun images of animals. So one of the animals was a pig, right?
Mm-hmm.
Big pig comes wandering through the space, and you're seeing, you only see it on the tablet, but you're seeing it in the entire space through the tablet.
Mm-hmm.
Big pig is wandering through, and I thought of it a little bit like Animal Farm, the big
Yes.
pig. But then I had other things. I had some beautiful things. I had one was a flock of butterflies came flying out of the thing. I couldn't resist myself. I had to do something absolutely gloriously, completely sappy, But I love the monarch butterflies, and they're just so gorgeous. And how could they help you? How could you not feel just a tinge of joy, no matter how cynical you are, no matter how hardened you are? How could you not feel a tinge of joy by seeing these butterflies? And then I also had a common housefly,
Mm-hmm.
the typical housefly that everybody has in their house,
Mm-hmm.
flying down and flipping around and doing stuff. He was adorable, and so on and so forth. So that was the show. A little bit antic, a little bit manic, a little bit joyful, kind of euphoric,
Right.
and so that's what I was working on.
Well, if I ever have an image of you, I mean, I don't live with you, so I don't see you at all 24 hours, but I see your face always lit up with the biggest smile and the crinkly eyes. And for me, you are a joyful artist. I mean, again, I don't know what happens on off hours, but
Yeah,
that show
yeah.
seems to be a perfect example of yourself.
Well, like we all have a spectrum, do we not? We go from joy to, but I agree with you, and I think, I mean, I do have joy. I do feel joy, and I know joy, as we all do,
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, if you talk to critical theorists or Marxists and whatever, they're always very leery of the way media, I mean, and rightly so, media uses these human emotions to manipulate us, so uses joy,
Mm-hmm.
energy, all this sort of stuff to manipulate us. And yet at the same time, does that mean that we have no recourse or no access to joy, you know? And and so I think, of course, the answer is no. It doesn't mean that we must celebrate joy. This is one of the things that they would rob us of,
Yes, yes,
right?
yes.
This is one of the things politically they'd say the world's a dark place. You can't, By the way, both the left and the right have this kind of absurd reality.
Mm-hmm.
And so, my goal was to connect to something larger that way, and to you know again, the show doesn't have a message. I
Mm-hmm.
on a place where I'm trying to talk you into something. It's
Mm-hmm.
not propaganda, And so, yeah. So, but thank you. I appreciate you acknowledging that, joy lives here.
Well, you mentioned briefly that you had been thinking about magic lately and how magic is so much a part of our world now. I mean, I think when you speak of things like joy, the question is, do we have to wait for something to be joyful, or are we joyful and therefore things magically manifest themselves around us to support that joy? I mean, I don't know.
It's such an important question, and a question that everybody has to answer for themselves, you know?
Right.
I mean, the when we see political movements that have been successful, where injustice was done, say Gandhi, for example, I guess everybody points up Gandhi because he's so far away. It's historically so distant and all that sort of stuff. And so it seems like he was successful and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Was assassinated, much like Martin Luther King or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You see those movements, somebody had to fight, somebody had to lay down their life, lay down the law, lay down the edge and say, this is unacceptable. And also, just, I mean, in the instance of the Black movement in America and also Martin Luther King specifically and Gandhi, these were nonviolent movements, right?
Yes.
They really had to have a will and an edge about them, So where's joy in this? Because, because you have to be vigilant, right? You can't. And so I've struggled with this, I want to say. But so I'm not sure that today I'm smart enough or that I have a big enough spirit to give the answer to that. Except, again, to say, if we're robbed of joy, if we're robbed of the ability to experience the joy between you and me and celebrating something, or even celebrating a moment of intimacy, of quiet, of healing. Joy is healing, Now, the other thing you said, which was, I think, by the way, if we can't do that, then we're kind of lost, I feel.
Right.
We have to make space for this in our lives, right? We have to find this way. This is healing. This is important. At the same time, you said, does joy just happen to me, or do I create, do I feel joy and then create like a structure around me where joy comes to me, right? That joy. And, I think, I'm an optimistic person. I mean, you can ask my wife, I can also be quite pessimistic or quite concerned, quite dark in my prognosis for, near-term future.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to say that, I entertain and believe in the power of the mind to create the reality around us.
Yes.
And, it's an interesting thing. I can't, like, for example, there's levels of control, right? There's levels of control. I'm not the president of the United States. That's not the level of control that I have.
Right.
I am in control of a small territory, and it's called my life.
Right.
And so the challenge here is for me to engage. I can't always control what happens to me or what's happening in the world, but what I can control is what I do with it, how I respond to it, right? That's where I have control. So magic, let's talk about the magic a little bit, because I think, I don't think there's any question that Trump is a magical event in America, right? Not a white magic, but
dark magic. Yeah.
There's no doubt he is absolutely working on perceptions.
Mm-hmm.
He does it through insistence. We know how he does it. It's 100% clear, right? And we all look at each other and say, how does anybody believe this, right? How does anybody believe this? But somehow or another, there's, this is the nature of magic, right?
Mm-hmm.
It can be used for good or for ill. And, I look across the culture and see, where did this come from? What is this about? Malcolm McLuhan talked about the change from a textual culture to an image-based, to an oral culture.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And he kind of predicted some of these things, that instead of facts and various things like, I'm now poorly quoting, Malcolm.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, he predicted this transition into a more tribal or more oral-based culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not factually based, but more narrative based, story based, right? And so and then you also have these weird things like Harry Potter and the Harry Potter books. And, people grew up completely ensconced in the Potter magic stuff,
Right.
right? And so and then also in a generation, and a lot of people have bemoaned it, but in a generation that says, uh, my children can do no wrong. No, everybody gets an award. Everything is encouraged. Do you know what I'm trying to get at,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
That without any effort, everybody was great. You know, everybody was good. I kind of have a foot in that other old world, the world of personal responsibility, and where you had to compete really hard to be at the top, and
Right.
it was rigorous and difficult and grueling and da 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 da. And maybe wrong. I mean, we're seeing that more and more. I think Black Lives Matter has pointed up to us the systemic, in racism for sure, but the lack of opportunity. But anyway, I think that's coming to the fore. I think that's being understood. So we're in a real issue. We're in a place of perception. We don't have facts. We have VACs, and VACs are values plus opinions equal worldview, right? Those are VACs.
Right.
And that's what we have right now. And when we're dealing with perception, then that possibility for magic is very powerful. Now I should get into defining magic or something like that. But the thing I want to say about that is that I've really, really opened up. In your art practice, things are there. You're working with a whole bundle of things, right? This is there. Magic is important. You hear people use the word magical all the time when they're talking about works of art, and then you're also kind of like, wow, what a cliche. Oh my God, that's so stupid. I've woken back up to the fact that the work of art is one of the most radical and basic works of magic in our culture.
Absolutely.
And that we see it. I mean, you go to just incredible places I think you look at some Basquiat paintings, right? And
Mm-hmm.
magic in there, man. You look at them and your eye just keeps crawling across them, and you keep crawling across and looking back in, going, wow, I can't get out of this thing. It's amazing. What is it? Or you look at, there's so many people that are like this, right? So many people that engage this. As you know, I went to Germany to study with Joseph Beuys. I got a full
Mm-hmm.
scholarship to do it. Beuys engaged shamanism, and
Mm-hmm.
Beuys is kind of tainted too. I don't want to. I don't want. Beuys is an incredibly problematic figure. It's not really clear, that his charisma was all a good thing, and that his engagement with shamanism wasn't just some trickery, some tomfoolery. But by the way, that's our role, isn't it? Trickery and tomfoolery. I mean, that's what artists do. That's who we are. Again, to tie it a little bit to the political moment, I really think, that's the character that Trump is as well.
Yes.
But it's bare knuckle power that he's after, right? It's not, oh, look, life can, bare knuckle power. And the thing that I want to point out is that we have to kind of see this darkness, and we have to see it in ourselves, right? As artists, we have to in ourselves and see, wow, now all of a sudden, what are the moralities that we need to examine in our own lives and in our,
Mm-hmm.
so that we don't become this, tyrant.
Yeah.
You and I think I always say that Trump's Studio 54 years, he rubbed up against artists all the time.
Right.
And they informed him. I mean, people say, "Oh no, he doesn't know anything about art. He doesn't." Man, he was in New York culture, and New York culture was all about the arts at that, and Studio 54 and all that stuff. And art was so important in it. And the tricksters of those days, the Warhol, who understood media. You don't think he learned from Warhol? Oh my God, of course he did.
Yes,
Or
good point.
we have to kind of accept, or we have to kind of take ownership of the fact that he was, it's more complex. There's Roy Cohn. There's all kinds of other influences in there. And then there's the unbelievable psychological trauma that is his family.
Right.
All right, so whatever. I don't know
So,
what.
so basically, we created that monster, a collective. He's a
So
product of us.
yeah, we can say, oh, it's the people that are ignorant, or it's people that blah blah blah, conservative, blah,
Yeah.
but we're part of it.
Yeah.
We can't separate ourselves out completely. We're not. We can't let ourselves off the hook.
I agree.
We've got to be vigilant.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
We have to examine our shadow.
yeah, that's right. And he, you know, he invites us to do it. He totally invites us to do it. Wow, we really did make this about Trump, didn't we?
Well, at the end of the day, right now, that shadow on people's joy is that shadow of him. So, I mean, in America at least, when you travel outside of America, you kind of escape this, what you call the tribal consciousness, and it's a welcome relief. But then when you come back here, the shadow is bigger and heavier. I mean, I was off the radar for 5 days, and I came back and heard about Portland and these masked troops arresting people, pretty much just dragging them into vans. And I mean, I'm appalled. I'm like, what is going on? It's unbelievable that this manifestation has been created again, or allowed to be created by us.
Well, we saw it with the children, the immigrant, immigrants trying to get across the border and separating them from the family.
Right.
And the argument was, well, they broke the law and blah, blah, blah. And then other people were saying, well, if we allow this to happen, they're going to come for us. And now look, they're coming for us.
That is so true. It's the Department of Homeland Security. You're so right.
Yeah.
They're coming for us. Exactly.
They're coming for us. It's the same group of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, the idea that people are being unmarked, the uniforms don't have names or badges, don't have identification. They're unmarked.
Yeah.
They're telling everybody, we can disappear you.
Yeah. Yeah.
We can disappear you.
Yeah.
And that is like,
yeah, that's the black magic right there.
Yeah, it totally is.
Yeah, the dark magic.
And the fact that, I mean, I know, I tell you that 99% of, maybe 95, 98, I don't know exactly what the percentage is, but of the people I know are not for Trump. So I don't know a lot of people that are for Trump. But the people I do know for Trump, I'm just flabbergasted. I'm like, every time I see them and I think about them, I'm just like, how could you be manipulated this way? How can you go this? And in one case, the fellow that I know is very wealthy. He just loves the tax cuts. He loves that he keeps his money.
Yeah. And the other side is fear. I think fear of, what could happen if things change.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's amazing that I'm flabbergasted as well that Biden is the nominee for the Democrats. I'm just flabbergasted. But clearly people are saying, we want some boring shit here. Okay.
Yeah.
We're really tired of all the drama. Let's get it back to normal. And, as I am pessimistic in the short run, I'm pessimistic. And I think the next 4 or 5 months are going to be the greatest chaos we've ever seen in our lives in this country.
Yes.
And so I'm pessimistic and I'm nervous, I'm worried, but I'm also, if we manage to get over the hump, it could also change back in the same speed that it went down.
That's a good point as well, too.
If there's a Democratic Congress and a Congress and Senate and a Democratic president, it could change back on a dime.
Well, someone just mentioned to me, and I had never considered it. She was like, the week of the elections, she's going to be out of America. And I thought she might be right. That might be a good week not to be in America.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing, isn't it, that we're all talking about leaving America, because it's so, not everybody's talking about leaving America, but the point is that, who would have thought in 3 short years we'd be here?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I think Bush and Cheney kind of set this up a little bit. You know, they they made contributions to the infrastructure
Yes.
to create this moment as well. You know, but
Yeah, we didn't just get here. It's been a process.
yeah, that's right. So let's go back to art for a second
Yeah.
because I just feel like we should go back to art.
Mm-hmm.
It can't all be politics. It can't all be politics.
Well, everything is related, but I agree with you. Let's finish on a high note.
Yeah, right.
So tell me again, so I know your wife, Marianne Strandell, is doing work somewhat related to technology, but her work is so completely different from yours. It's almost like night and day. And again, you're the yin and yang sort of with the blonde hair and the dark hair. But what are the commonalities? Like, what do you see as common stuff that she might influence you with, and vice versa?
Well, you know that I think for artists to be around artists is really important. And if you go back to any artist's formative years, they're always around artists and they're always interchanging and exchanging and doing things. And I think that Marianne and I have that same spirit. We're very different people, right? And I really actually, we have a commonality because you have to have a commonality in a relationship for it to work.
Mm-hmm.
But we're very, very different people. And that difference keeps us uh, challenged, keeps us exchanging, keeps us moving. I'm always craving her input into what do you think of this? What do you think of that?
Interesting.
I'm thinking about this. What? Because I feel like my mind, I can just get crazy sometimes. I can really get off base, spin out of control.
Right.
So I'm always looking for her to kind of help me land it, be back on the earth. And Marianne has a very grounded, very disciplined practice. It's kind of threefold.
Mhm.
And so, that kind of interaction is really great. The other thing is she's a painter and I'm a sculptor. Painters, you know, painters can be quite experimental and you can break down the canvas. And she does that. She paints on the walls and she does these kind of environment kinds of things. And they still very much end up in painting. Whereas I feel like sculpture, and I've already told you that, I've expanded. I feel like one of the things that I've done is expand sculpture and its expression
Yeah.
into, kind of a new place, a new platform. And, so that's sort of the way sculpture is. Sculpture can be anything. It can include anything. It can be, because it deals with the real world all the time. It has real components in it. So on and so forth. Not that painting doesn't, but painting is more still, illusory.
Yes.
You
Yes.
know, and it's reflections of reality and reflections on reality. So is my work, of course. But again, there's a lot of similarities, but then there's some distinctions, some real distinctions, some differences.
Well, thank you for bringing me on this odyssey from the start of the discussion till now. I mean, I'm sure we can speak for much longer, but I'm gonna let us end here, and perhaps we'll do another episode sometime in the future, post everything, post post magic.
Absolutely, absolutely. Nicolette, I wanted to say two things.
Hmm.
First of all, I see your stories on
Hmm.
Facebook/Instagram. I'm
Hmm.
never sure which one's which, so forgive me if I get it wrong.
Yeah.
But I see your stories and how active you are about posting the stories of, African Americans and Black experience, the Black diaspora in this hemisphere. And I think it's so extraordinary, and I really admire. It's one of the reasons that I wanted to do this with you,
Yeah.
is that I just think what you're doing is a force of good. So thank you for that.
Well,
Really,
thank you for looking at it. I sometimes wonder who looks at that stuff.
yeah,
And for me, it's a form of catharsis because, to be honest, I mean, you know about seeing me around in the art world and how many people of African descent are even present there.
yeah,
But as I said recently, America made me a black woman. I never really thought about being a black woman until recently. And
Yeah.
it's by seeing others suffering that I myself have started to identify with this cause. I mean, for myself, I'm pretty comfortable. I have a comfortable life. I have great friends of every color, race, and ethnicity. But yes, I think we all have to stand up now and help to make things better for everyone. I
Yeah, I
think,
think that's kind of incredible.
yeah.
Bravo, bravo.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, when everyone is happy, everyone will be happy.
Yeah.
Let's spread the joy.
That's-
All right, big kiss to you and have a great weekend. Thanks for taking the time out to speak to us.
Yeah, thank you, Nicolette. I really appreciate it.
We'll
Great
talk
talking.
soon. Yeah, take care.
All right, bye-bye.
Big kiss to Marianne. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Bees and Honey podcast. Next week, we'll have another episode for you. And hopefully, you're enjoying this beautiful summer after the hard times we had in the beginning of the year. It gives us a little bit of hope that things might improve by the end of the year. If you're aware of what's going on in America right now, it's all very strange times. There are limits to our freedom once it imposes on others. But we keep the flame of hope alive, and art is definitely one way that we can shape the future. Thank you for joining us and have a great week.